Good afternoon, everybody. And so I'm going to be presenting with Peter on the Tudor paintings research project and a repository pilot. And I'm from the National Portrait Gallery, and my role in the Towards National Collection project has been very much from the curatorial, non-technical specialist perspective, and so the sort of end user point. And we had at the National Portrait Gallery, from the result of a long-standing research project, a large number of images of Tudor paintings that we've been working in collaboration with the Yale Centre for British Art and the Bolland Centre for Studies in British Art. And this was something that we really wanted to begin to explore through kind of possibilities that IIIF might open up this large data set that we hold. And through the course of the project, we were able to work with Peter. So I'll pass on to him to introduce.
Hey, good afternoon. So just a couple of background. DataFutures is a German not-for-profit. It's funded by some partner organizations, mainly European and US institutions. And we are the community lead for IIIF and also for OCFL in the InvenioRDM consortium. InvenioRDM is the technology platform for Zenodo. It was developed initially by CERN, and RDM is a consortium we've put together over the last 4 years, which now has about 17 or 18 institutional contributors. So the next one. So there's a very simple presentation, really. We had talked with Joseph and subsequently with Charlotte about a year ago, a little more than a year ago. And we agreed to build a repository using what then was the in development InvenioRDM. It was at version 4. It's just about to come out at version 9. And we were interested in the coherent set of images of Tudor portraits they had, because one of the things on our roadmap was to actually implement the Mirador IIIF viewer in Webpack so that it was using a native IIIF service within the repository. And this is just a quick narrative of how that happened. So during May, we talked about the corpus we were going to use. And I think on the 31st, we got a data set from Charlotte. And in the subsequent weeks, we used an infrastructure that we've had in place for, I don't know, 10 years or so, which is MongoDB based, to do accession of those images and metadata in the form of a spreadsheet. There's some screenshots in a minute. Using this Riso platform, and that enabled us to produce a workflow for Charlotte to subsequently do metadata enrichment. And in the short term, that infrastructure had ORCID authentication that was not open to the public. It was really for research purposes. So within a couple of weeks, we had built a digital collection of the images with DataCite flavored metadata. InvenioRDM is basically DataCite. And you've got to make all sorts of decisions about what is going to be a custom data type and what's going to be cast into true DataCite elements. And then the week after, we were able to automatically generate an InvenioRDM repository and a different IIIF service native to the repository instance, which in the short term had also ORCID access. So you couldn't get in unless you gave it an ORCID, and your ORCID was on a whites list. And this pretty much completed by the end of June. And there was subsequent discussion about the visual design, the look and feel, and getting release from the National Portrait Gallery to launch this service publicly. And that finally happened in, I think it was September last year, was it, Charlotte?
Yeah.
So there, within pretty much a month from signing an agreement and having the basic terms of what was to be made available publicly, to having it available for review and subsequent launch, basically 1 person month. And I guess the things to underline are that the InvenioRDM platform is the ongoing technology base, and CERN has already started re-implementing Zenodo using that. So that's the G7 authorized global catch-all repository for research data. So really what we've been able to demonstrate here is that infrastructure that had large-scale contribution over many years from multiple countries and multiple funding sources, not least the European Commission's Open Air program, has provided a pretty gentle on-ramp for heritage data. And we've got a couple of examples showing what's happening in other fields which allow things like annotation, production of WADM, preservable annotation, metadata, and also longer term OCFL archives. So perhaps if we could just look at the diagram. So this breaks down into three simple steps, which kind of mirror what I've just said. We start with image files and basic metadata. Using Mongo, we create a temporary digital collection, which allows us to organize metadata and form it into a more data site friendly structure. That's got a separate IIIF service. It's not really intended for public consumption. And in point of fact, having now launched the InvenioRDM, we can destroy all of the Friso investment because it was really just an on-ramp to organize the data. But Friso allowed us to generate IIIF services and to actually produce the InvenioRDM repository at scale without having to create gazillion assets individually. And what you get with that is long-term support of the repository for public access. It's got a whole bunch of stuff that you really don't want to implement on an institutional basis, such as protocol for metadata harvesting. It's got a large support community. As I said, we're just at RDM release 9, and probably we shall get through 11 by the end of this year. And one of the new functions coming down the pike is that we can now produce OCFL archives at scale, basically snapshot the repository into an archive file, which can live on tape, nearline, effectively a dark archive, and which concentrates on versioning. So if there's ongoing contribution and metadata development within the repository, we can occasionally snapshot that to a format that can live on media that has a much lower cost barrier, and individual cartridges such as LTO tapes only need to be renewed every 30 years or so. So perhaps just look at the last slide.
So this was just for me to have a moment to say about joys of metadata and a bit of everyone contributing that from sort of my end of the project, there's very much that first moment where you present your metadata very kind of proudly, and it's actually a complete mess and makes no logic. So that kind of refining process, but then there was this opportunity to add kind of enhanced metadata. So actually, you know, the volume of information and the range of information we could get was brilliant. It just took that sort of two-step process and me to make sure the kind of consistency and language. And so we settled on, because we were thinking of it as a pilot of 16 works from the gallery's collection, for which we had a whole range of images, from kind of a hero master image to snapshots of paintings in their frames, X-ray, IR, UV. So just to kind of give that breadth. So that was the sort of sample range that we picked. So yes, Paul, this is back to your world of the example.
No, I mean, this is completely where the work was actually done. So the previous slide was a view of the initial metadata, wasn't it, Charlie?
Yeah, I think that might be the enhanced one with the about this portrait information. Yeah. Yep.
But that was actually further enriched within Friso and actually subsequently within Invenio itself. So here we're seeing the on-ramp, the accession of Charlotte's data. This is the MongoDB interface. And if we go on, Look at the next slide.
Yeah.
So this is just one of the records. And you can see at the top of the previous screen, you can view it in Mirador, but you can also edit the metadata interactively. And there are search facets on the left, rather like Invenio. All this, the Friso thing predates Invenio by some years. Next one. So this is Mirador 3 in Webpack within the repository. And this is open to the public, and the current agreement is for there to be support of this pilot for 5 years. And really, we've done the heavy lifting. There's just a handful of assets in there, but this is infrastructure that it's identical to the Zenodo platform. So this will operate at scale. We've got other Invenio corpus repositories with millions of records in the same way that Zenodo has. The next one. So here's the detailed view within Invenio of one of the records. And I guess it's also worth saying that you can use the Mirador viewer full screen, so you could actually have multiple views of different records side by side. And you'll see that this is familiar from Joseph's presentation, because it's the same Harvard, Stanford Mirador development.
And just to add that, sort of from the National Portrait Gallery's perspective, so this was all sort of new world for us, that we're not kind of, that we're at the beginning of our IIIF journey and using it in certain kind of on-site access moments. We've had certain sort of embedded storytelling methods in our on our website, but these sort of collections-based moments, and so all those kind of internal conversations about access and releasing things to the world with Creative Commons licenses. And so this was a really great kind of test project that worked with a group of things and put them out into the world. So future plans.
Yeah, so this, I mean, we've probably overused our time, but this is really straightforward. So the immediate plan is for there to be 5 years of support of the repository itself, and obviously we can extend that. We will produce an OCFL from this when we get on to the next release of Invenio, and that will go to a distributed LTO tape library. But I think perhaps you could say a couple of words, Charlotte, about the potential for annotation and adding additional records we've talked about across institutional whole bank corpus with the National Gallery.
Exactly, yes. So the kind of annotation question, and this was something that perhaps has been sort of addressed, if I understand correctly, in between the different, as Invenio has moved on. And so now, as an example of the Voltaire project, we've got the image here that has built-in annotation options. So it's been, again, as I say, from the sort of non-technical side, astonishing to see over the course of a year that we were working with Invenio 9 and what was being constructed, and that is now part of it, but can now go on to do so many other things that's widely available. So annotation is absolutely something we can now do with the Tudor images. An example here of the kind of photomicrograph map we'd love to be able to do. And then the other sort of future plan and kind of stumbling block in the broader questions of the kind of towards national collection, that we had the sort of conversations about how we might run a test of cross-collection repositories. And so working with the National Gallery, the Tudors had a great sort of case study example of our sort of shared whole bind group, but it sort of fell at the institutional hurdle rather than necessarily the technical hurdle of the permissions to be able to work together. So, you know, conversations to continue and in the future, but an example that I think many people listening will be familiar with in the sort of, we're addressing the technical questions of a national collection, but there's also the institutional questions. And I think that's us. Thank you very much.
Indeed, thank you.
Thank you very much. There's one question at the moment in the question and answers. Were you able to virtually layer the different images stroke information relating to the same portrait? So that's just a question to the relation to the choice of how the viewer was implemented, I expect.
Do you want me to?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, totally. So this only implemented Mirador 3 in Webpack. As I said, you can turn on the functionality to juxtapose multiple images of the same object, including other instruments in Webpack to be able to do this within the repository could certainly be done. But I think another observation is that having done this, we've also now got a reference IIIF service for these objects. I mean, we just mentioned annotation in passing, and there's not really time to talk about it here, but Voltaire is a project using a much more recent workflow, and there are certainly 1,000 or so annotations. We've got other corpus repositories with 800,000 annotations, but you have to begin to take care for those annotations to be referenced against known and long-term guaranteed resources. So I think this is a larger discussion. Clearly you could support overlaying of instruments, overlaying of different views of a record, but you would need other instruments to achieve that.
And perhaps something to pick up in the conversation afterwards, but Tom, am I right in thinking memories of a conversation about scaling images, that was something you had thought about, which is part of the question of overlaying images, that you've been working at one point on scaling options?
Yeah, there is an article about that somewhere. I don't know if Joe can dig out the link and stick it in there. But yeah, how do we deal with things that are different sizes when all our IIIF image services make everything the same size?